Welcome to Lunch with the Lord. I'm Pastor Mark. We're in Mark chapter 12. We're going to be looking at verses 38 to 40 this lesson. But before we begin, Jeremiah 15:16, thy words were found, and I did eat them, and thy word was unto me the joy and the rejoicing of my heart. Now, in verses 38 to 40, Jesus is judging the scribes. And he says here in verse 38, and he said unto them in his doctrine, beware of the scribes, which love to go in long clothing and love salutations in the marketplaces. Now, if we go to Luke chapter 20, and we look at verse 45, this is the same situation. And it says here in verse 45, then in the audience of all the people, he said unto his disciples, beware of the scribes which desire to walk in long robes. Now, what's interesting about this is that Jesus here, there's a group of people all around him. And the scribes are, asking questions and things. And right in front of the scribes himself, Jesus said, beware of the scribes, right? They're right there. Jesus isn't holding back anything. So he says here, beware of the scribes which love to go in long clothing, and they love salutations in the marketplaces. Now, when Jesus tells us to beware of something, we need to take special heed as to how this applies to our life today. It's okay to observe what they say, but do not do what they do. They were very religious people, and they wanted everyone to know that they were religious. I don't know, maybe you know someone in your church or someone at work or wherever, and their manner of being, they want people to know that they are religious. And that's okay, but do what they say, but maybe not what they do, because sometimes the outward show maybe might somewhat betray them in the future. So in Matthew chapter 6, Jesus tells us the secret life of the Christian. In verses 1 through 4 of Matthew 6, when you do your alms, do them where? Do them in secret, before God only. In verses 5 to 15, when you pray, pray in secret, alone with the Father. And in verses 16 to 18, when you fast, fast in secret, so only God knows. When you do these things in secret, then you will receive great rewards. So the scribes and the Pharisees in Jesus' day, they walked around and they wanted people to know they were religious. They wanted sympathy. They wanted prestige and honor. And, when they would fast, they would, make their face look like they were fasting, and people would give them sympathy for the sufferings they were going through for the sake of God, right? And so Jesus is saying, whatever you do before God, do it in secret between yourself and God. Don't accept, don't try to look for sympathy or rewards from people here on earth, because when you do, Jesus said, you've got your reward. You get a pat on the back. That's all you're going to get. When you stand before God, you got your reward here on earth. You're not going to get anything in heaven. But the problem is that our sinful nature wants to get involved in our devotion to God and to turn it away from God and to turn it to self. Sometimes we can get caught up into that trap. Our sinful nature begins to yearn within us that we want to have our reward. We want to be seen by people here on earth that we are religious. And we want to turn ourselves, in a sense, away from God and to have it turned upon us. When people look at us, we want them to think about us and not God, right? And that's wrong. When people see your life, they should see God. You should be a reflection of the glory of God, not a reflection of your glory, but a reflection of the glory of God. When people see your life, they contemplate the kind of person that you are, it should bring honor to God, not to yourself. So he says here that they go about, in verse 38, they love to go in long clothing. Now, these were the long, stately robes that priests wore. Jesus was never against wearing robes, but he was against the motive for wearing robes, right? And the same thing, you go to churches today and they have all these, certain robes on, the priest or pastor does, and they wear certain clothing. And, in a sense, is it for the glory of God or is it for self-glory? And then he says they love salutations in the marketplaces. Now, the lust for being acknowledged as a teacher or as someone that should be respected because they are religious. And it was especially desired by them in front of a lot of people. Jesus says, don't be like the scribes. Don't be like them. They walk around in these nice stately robes and people, everywhere, and they want to be noticed by the public and they walk around in public. They want people to admire them. Jesus never demanded or desired such titles from anyone. He didn't desire any title of being called a rabbi or a scribe or anything like that. Jesus didn't, when someone came to Jesus and said, Lord or Jesus, he didn't rebuke him and say, you should call me rabbi, right? No. But, this is what happens within the sinful heart. The sinful heart gets caught up in the prestige and in the honor of the times and of the people around. And it wants to be like Haman in the book of Esther. It wants to be honored, right? Your flesh, your sinful flesh wants to be honored and respected. And if there's a Mordecai in your life, right? If there's one person who won't give you respect, that'll eat away at you like nothing. Yep. If there's one person that won't give you the respect that you think you deserve or you should have because you're a religious person, it eats away at you and gnaws at your heart because you want the flesh. Listen, the sinful flesh wants to be admired and desired by all. And if there's one that's not, well, then it's not satisfied until everybody and just like Haman in the Old Testament. You can go over my lessons on the book of Esther. You'll see. Now, verse 39 says, and the chief seats in the synagogues and the uppermost rooms at feasts. Now, the chief seats, these would be the seats or the benches up on in the front of the synagogue, facing the congregation. These seats were reserved for people of distinction. But it wasn't just the synagogue, but it was wherever they went or to whatever function that they happened to attend, whether it would be a wedding or some kind of social gathering. They desired the best seats, right? Because, well, they were a scribe. Look at the clothes I have on. I'm a religious person. I represent God, right? Therefore, I should be in the front. God should be honored here through me, of course. But so they desired the chief seats, the seats right up front. And then it says here in verse 40, which devour widows' houses, and for a pretense make long prayers, these shall receive greater damnation. Now, it says here they devour widows' houses. Now, it basically means that they try as hard as they can to get widows to will their home to the temple. They want these widows to will their home to the temple. And in turn, it is sold, and the money from the sale would go to them. And to cover up, their sneaky plot, they look religious by offering up long and great prayers to God for the giving or the blessing of the house. So they go into these widows' houses, and they make all kinds of prayers and all kinds of religious things, all for the hopes of getting that widow to will the house to the church, to the temple. And in turn, when the widow dies and the house goes into the possession of the synagogue or the temple, whatever, then they in turn sell the house and get the profits for themselves. And it says here, they will receive, because of these kinds of deceptive things, they will receive the greater damnation. People who put on a religious facade for the sake of pretending to know God and to serve God, and then they use that facade to manipulate and to get personal gain from people, their judgment will be way much more severe. The judgment of someone who imitates God, who in a sense mocks God by trying to put this facade on that they represent God, and they manipulate people and they lie to people, all for the sake of gain or honor. They're going to receive much greater damnation. Why? Why is that? Because they do it all in the name of God. They attach God's name and God's character to all their sinful and selfish lusts. They're deceiving people. They're attaching God to their sinful and selfish lusts. And now when the facade is exposed to people and they see them for what they are, they mistakenly associate God with that deception, and it turns their hearts away from God. In the lake of fire, it will be those who used Judaism and Christianity for sinful and personal gain who will receive the greater damnation. Why? I mean, if a person's just a sinner, they're a sinner. But when a person knowingly deceives people by pretending to be religious in the name of God, in God's name, representing God, and they deceive people, they cheat people, they steal from people, they will receive the greater damnation because they are misrepresenting the nature and the character of Almighty God. And that's severe punishment. Jesus warns us not to be like them. Learn the secret life of the Christian that's between yourself and God. And God, who sees in secret, will reward you openly in his time. If we learn the secret life, pray in secret, do your alms, your giving in secret, serve God in secret, love God in secret, study the Word of God in secret in your heart. Now you have friends, obviously you can study with friends, you go to Bible studies. But it means don't make an outward show to the world that you're doing these things just to receive honor and some kind of prestige from people. But if you learn to do them in secret, then God, who sees in secret, will reward you openly. Now, whether that openly means here on earth or in heaven, it doesn't matter. Let God do it in his time. For your own personal study, if you'd like, it's believed that Jesus also spoke at this time, Matthew 23. Now, Matthew 23 is that great chapter on woe to you scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, right? Woe to you lawyers, woe to you, and he denounces them. It's believed that at this time in the Gospel of Mark, that it's mentioned in Matthew's Gospel that Jesus spoke Matthew 23. Jesus said that a forthcoming judgment was coming upon this generation, well, not ours, but that generation, the generation that Jesus was in at that time. In Matthew 23, Jesus gives the reason why he is denouncing the Pharisees and the other Jewish teachers of the law. Judgment will come to the city and to the Jewish people for their corrupt and sinful ways, and for rejecting the kingdom that the Messiah offered. Judgment was coming upon that generation. Judgment was coming on that generation. Jesus said, we sent prophets and people to you for hundreds of years. And now judgment will come upon that generation. And it did. It did with in AD 70 when Jerusalem was destroyed. Tremendous suffering at that time. And when God allowed the Jewish nation to receive punishment for rejecting the Messiah, rejecting everything about the coming Messiah that John the Baptist and all the prophets in the Old Testament spoke of, tremendous suffering that they experienced because of that rejection. So if you'd like, you can read Matthew 23 because it goes along with what we just did. Mark 12, verses 38 to 40, right? Next lesson, we're going to get into the widow's mite, the teaching of the widow's mite. But until then, walk with the Lord. I know he walks with you.